In a lineage of royalty, a young boy would ascend to one of the wealthiest thrones in the history of mankind. Mansa Musa, or King Musa, would not be content with dwelling in wealth alone, but would embark on a journey of faith, diplomacy, and wealth, famously told through generations as he conquered cities, crashed an economy, and traversed the Sahara to fulfill a religious duty with the greatest entourage ever seen. As the echoes of his footsteps faded into the annals of history, Mansa Musa remains an enigma, a beacon of awe and inspiration. This is the story of the Golden King, Mansa Musa. Kanku Musa was born in 1280, at a time when Mali was a flourishing empire. As any child born in royalty, Musa got the best of everything life had to offer. However, Musa was not determined to be king, because at the time it was Mansa Abubakar II, a king with extensive thirst for exploration. As the Mali Empire encompassed modern-day Gambia and Senegal, Mansa Abubakar II had direct access to the Atlantic, and he was fascinated with the idea of exploring what waited on the other side of the ocean. Eventually, his fascination was turned into action as the king decided to send 200 ships equipped with men, gold, water, and all provisions to last for years across the ocean, telling his captains not to come back until they discovered what was on the other side. After some time, only one ship returned, but not with encouraging news. The captain of the surviving ship informed the king that all other ships were washed away in a strong current. This kind of news would push a man to stop. However, it was not enough for the Mansa, and so he commissioned the construction of 2,000 ships, filled it with gold, men, and provisions to last an eternity, and sailed off into the sunset. But before he left, he appointed Musa as a regent until he returned. Musa waited and waited and waited, but none of those ships were ever seen again. Upon realization that the Mansa would most likely never return, Musa declared himself king. Many theories have suggested that Abubakar II landed in South America, but most conclude that he and his men died in the ocean, maybe even swallowed by the Canary currents. Regardless, Abubakar's disappearance was a backdrop of one of the greatest reigns on the African continent. Abubakar's voyage was possibly seen as a shameful abdication of duty, but Mansa Musa had bigger plans. In the first few years of his reign, Musa spent most of his time in military conflicts, raiding nearby cities and acquiring slaves. The situation of Mali was integral to trade, as it was the connection between the north and the sub-Sahara of Africa, and having control over that region would add legitimacy to any king's rule. Gold and salt were two very important commodities at the time. Salt was vital in preserving and spicing food, and gold was non-corrosive, highly worshipped and a rare metal. At the height of his expansion, Musa had captured over 24 cities, enslaving about 6,000 slaves annually. During this time, his empire expanded over 3,200 kilometers from east to west, covering modern-day Mauritania, Senegal, Gambia, Ivory Coast, Burkina Faso, Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, and Niger, including a particular city that would gain historical reference as the El Dorado of Africa, Timbuktu. Ruling a vast area of land and acquiring people was never going to be easy, so the king carved his empire into 14 regions, each with their own rulers and a degree of autonomy. During this time, Mansa Musa would significantly increase his wealth as he monopolized gold and salt trade with taxes, controlled the copper and gold mines, and collected tributes from conquered tribes. This is why people argue that Mansa Musa is the wealthiest man in history. Even though it's difficult to calculate wealth due to inflation and time, it is estimated that Mansa at his height of wealth had over $400 billion attached to his name. Now, even though the Mali Empire was prosperous and even a very safe place, not much was known about it to the world. Musa was not just content with enjoying his kingdom. He wanted the world to know that such a kingdom flourishing with gold and culture existed in West Africa. He wanted to increase the influence of Mali, and at the time, Islam was the link between most of the known world, with trade, administrative practices, and literacy. And so Mansa Musa set his sights on the East, to make an impact that would be narrated for generations. There are 5 pillars in Islam: Shahada, Salah, Zakat, Sawm, and the Hajj. which is an obligatory pilgrimage to Mecca that one must partake in at least once in their lifetime. Granted, they have the physical and financial means. As the Mansa was a devout Muslim, he had to set out on the Hajj, especially when he had both means to do so. But this was Mansa Musa, and he was going to do it in style. So in 1324, the king left his son Muhammad in charge of the empire and took over 60,000 people with him on a 2,700-mile trip to Mecca, modern-day Saudi Arabia. This group consisted of slaves, heralds, soldiers, court officials, griots, merchants, and camel drivers. The heralds were adorned in silk with gold staff, while the slaves carried 4 pounds of gold bars. The camels were the main form of transportation, as about 600 of them also carried gold bars, but horses, donkeys, and even elephants were part of the animals in the entourage. This home started from home to Timbuktu and up northwest to Tagaza. His entourage was so large, it is claimed that it took almost a whole day for it to pass through a city. Musa also made sure to be generous along the way, giving gold bars to the witnessing masses in the cities he passed, while using gold to buy souvenirs from these locations. Musa would occasionally drift from his caravan to witness exciting wildlife on horses, so that they could catch up with the caravan after some exploration. This trip did not come without challenges though, as temperatures would be so high during the day and fall past zero at nights. The caravan also had to be mindful of water throughout the trip, filling up wherever they saw pockets of water for the group and animals as well. Eventually, the caravan arrived at Cairo, a place the Mansa longed to visit, that he decided to rest there for 3 months. However, mild tension arose as he was invited to the court of the Sultan of Egypt at the time, Al-Nasir Muhammad. The problem was it was customary to kiss the Sultan's hand or the ground by his feet, and this clearly was not a fond observation for the Mansa, as he is a king himself with a kingdom much wealthier than the Sultan's. But through humility and cunning, when the two finally met, Mansa kissed the ground before the Sultan, but acknowledged it to a greeting to Allah, a move which was a win-win for both rulers. After the awkwardness, both kings ended up enjoying each other's company for the next 3 months, exchanging gifts and telling stories of their lives. In addition to religious reasons, Mansa Musa wanted to create vital relationships with other kingdoms and introduce the world to the Mali kingdom. He gave away so much gold dust and bought so many souvenirs, he flooded the market and crashed the economy of Egypt, turning the precious metal of gold into a common commodity. Eventually, Musa left Cairo and after some time crossed into Asia for the first time in his life. It was exhilarating as he met Europeans, Asians, and Africans, either engaging in trade or embarking on religious missions. His next stop was Medina, where he visited Muhammad's mosque and once again conversed with religious scholars. Then finally, after miles upon miles from home, the Mansa set his eyes upon Mecca. He spent a few days there, engaging in pilgrimage, discarding all his gold and walking around in white silk, while also talking to other pilgrims to expand his knowledge on his faith. It almost all came to a bitter end as a bloody fight almost broke out between Somalian and Turkish pilgrims. However, Musa was able to prevent this from happening after talking the groups down. Musa loved Mecca so much he considered living in the great city. However, he was a king and he had people to go back to. After fulfilling his religious rite, the Mansa set a course back home. However, it did not go as smoothly as he would have hoped. On the return, some members of his caravan were separated from the main group, which resulted in many of them dying from cold, starvation, or bandit raids. Despite this, Musa safely reached Cairo, but did not spend as much time as he did in his initial passing. Here lies 2 stories to what happened. The first is Musa borrowed gold back from the Egyptian merchants to help the economy after he had crashed it. But the second story is not as altruistic, because it is suspected that Musa ran out of gold and looked to borrow money and resell much of what he had purchased earlier. Regardless of which story is true, these merchants took advantage of the situation and exponentially raised the interest of these loans. Nonetheless, Mansa headed back to Mali, but not without persuading architects, griots, and scholars to accompany him home, professionals who would be part of the development of a historical city. Reaching Timbuktu and Gao, these cities surrendered to Musa after regaining their independence during his trip. Not holding the rebellion personal, Mansa held the children of the rebellious kings in his court, but decided to turn these settlements into global cities. He built libraries, universities, and mosques in Timbuktu, turning it into a global city where students did not have to leave Mali to Morocco anymore because of the quality of education in Mali. In fact, this even drew people to Timbuktu. A landmark of the urban civilization was the Jingarebe Mosque, a building that still stands today. It is constructed mainly of earth, with few reinforcing materials such as fiber, straw, and wood, and as it stands, it can hold a prayer space for up to 2,000 people. Another construction was the University of Sankore. Not all was safe though, as the Morsi kingdom invaded Timbuktu. However, the cunning Mansa was able to recover the city and build a fort to prevent future invasions. It's clear that he was deeply influenced during his travels, and the inspiration was the base for his advancement of his empire, building a reputation and creating a legacy that lives centuries beyond him. He did not only focus on material wealth, but he understood the power of knowledge, which attracted the best minds from the furthest places of the earth. But as we all know, all good things must come to an end. Mansa died in 1337. No one knows exactly how he died. However, scholars say Mansa Musa lived the life of a true king and left a lasting legacy, even though the empire declined. We do not know much about who he was as a person. All we know about him is observed by those who surrounded him. His son would only rule for 4 years and die from a sleeping sickness, leading to his uncle ruling, to eventually his grandchildren causing a civil war over the throne. In the aftermath, all cities under the empire revolted, and the empire was eventually conquered by the Songhai in the late 15th century. Centuries later, stories of his journey by the Egyptians were told, so much that it eventually garnered the attention of European traders. Also, the oral history of Mansa Musa still generates questions and sparks debate. Some scholars mention that Mansa actually killed Abu Bakr II to become king, as opposed to claiming kingship once Abu Bakr vanished. Others even argue about the name of Musa's predecessor altogether, mentioning that it was bin Muhammad and Abu Bakr was only a regent in the Keita bloodline. It is even speculated by others that Mansa's generosity may have been more of a nefarious plan to disrupt the economies of other empires in favor of elevating his own. Regardless, one thing is for certain. No matter how the history of Mansa Musa may be glossed over, he was a clever and cunning ruler who turned an already stable kingdom into an undeniable empire. He was persuasive, always questioning everything, and used his mind more than the sword to get nations to bow to him, all before the age of 60. That is something that is rare and may never be seen again in the future of humanity.